Hello, my lovelies, and welcome back to Neverending Tarot. If you're new here, hi, hello, and welcome. We are going to be continuing with our deck of the month, which is the Tarot of Oneness and my deck Strength versus Weakness series. And today we are actually stepping into our anti-pairs. So decks that energetically do not work well with the Tarot of Oneness. It's not about the aesthetics, it's about the energy of the decks. And I have 12 decks to show you. I will also link those, or list those rather, in the description box down below. But let's go ahead and jump right in here. I'll flip this over so you can see more of these pretty cards. And I will hopefully remember to link the deck flip through in the description box down below. So first of all, let me zoom in here a little bit closer. And we're going to start off with the Beautiful Beast Tarot, which was last month's deck of the month for this particular series. So for those of you that aren't familiar with it, you can go back for that information. And excuse this rehash, we're going to start with that just to make it easy. These two decks have the exact same job in my collection. However, they do not pair. Beautiful Beast does count as a pip deck, but it also has animal energy. So even though they have the same job, these two decks do not like to handle each other very well. They try to tackle the same job, but their perspectives on how to do that is entirely different. And it's because of the animal energy in the Beautiful Beast Tarot. Their approach is entirely different. The Tarot of Oneness approaches from a place of total caring, because it has self-care as a second strength. The Beautiful Beast Tarot has that animal influx to the deck, so it's a little bit more instinctive and primal. So these two just don't get along. And apologies for moving really fast, but we have 12 decks to get through. So the next one, let me show you the backings. You probably recognize it. This is the Radiant Wise Spirit Tarot. And yes, I only have it in a mini. So let me zoom in a little bit closer, just so you guys can see this small deck a little bit better. Okay. Now, these two do not have the same job in my collection. Not at all. And actually, the Radiant Wise, the strength of this deck is actually spirituality. Now, it is not anywhere near the top when it comes to any of my spirituality decks, but these two do just, they don't function. And you're going to start seeing a trend as I show you decks, and once I show you the next like 2 more decks, you'll understand why. So please bear with me for just a minute, because the next deck we have is the Heaven and Earth Tarot. Now, bump us up just a little bit. Hopefully you don't get a glare. This is a Llewellyn deck, Llewellyn deck. So there's high gloss on it. I'm so sorry if you have a glare. This used to be my #1 spirituality deck, believe it or not. And it was one of the decks that I learned on. And no, these two do not get along. And as you can see, artistically, they are completely opposite ends of the spectrum. I love how we have opposites right here, but they both have basically a cup on them. And you've probably already picked up on why these decks are not computing. But let me show you the last one before we totally get into the whys. Here is my current #1 spirituality deck. This is the Unfolding Path Tarot. This is the indie version, although it is now a mass market. So for those of you that do like the Unfolding Path Tarot, you can now purchase it for a cheaper price rather than the indie Kickstarter version. And there's like no changes to it. It's really awesome. Spirituality decks, near as I can tell, most of the time, will not pair with the Tarot of Oneness. That has been my experience in my collection. They just don't like to communicate. So, I don't know if it's because when you put a spirituality deck against the Tarot of Oneness that there's another deck that could do the job better to connect to spirituality. But basically, every known deck that I have that has a strength of spirituality doesn't pair. Granted, I keep getting influxes of decks, so maybe I will stumble across one that will actually pair with this particular deck. But for now, no. Even though it is not a weakness of the Tarot of Oneness, spirituality tends to be on the lower end of the spectrum when it comes to meshing. And with that said, we're going to move on. Here is the Magical Dogs Tarot, which for those of you that know my channel know this is my #1 shadow deck. And it's no big surprise that this is an anti-pair, because the weakness of our lovely Tarot of Oneness is shadow work. Now, that said, as much as it's obvious that these two will not pair, and I'm going to show you, like, I think 3 more decks that are shadow work, that doesn't always hold 100% true with the Tarot of Oneness. So let me show you these other decks first. Here is the Bloody Tears Tarot. Dmitry Rizak, I do believe, does this deck. It was a Kickstarter deck, and it's ink pen. It's actually really pretty. I have another deck of his, and it is a pip deck. It actually does pair with the Tarot of Oneness. You saw it earlier in my previous Perfect Pairs Tarot video, if you watched it. It's always interesting when you get a whole big section of stuff that doesn't pair or does pair. You learn the trends a little bit. And our next deck is a Taylor Holquist Todd deck. This is the Myths and Legends. Also another unique art medium, because she uses watercolor paints and ballpoint pens, or I should say gel pens. Really dark shadow deck. As you can see aesthetically, they're lunar opposites. Very much so. Not even in the same realm. And you're going to notice the same thing with the next shadow deck that I show you, because it is also the traditional dark for shadow decks. This is the Tarot of Vampyres by Ian Daniels. So Gothic Vampires versus Bright and Cheery, complete opposites. Most shadow decks, because that is the weakness of the Tarot of Oneness, will not pair. However, I did find one shadow deck that I had in my collection that, despite the odds, does pair with the Tarot of Oneness. I won't go into which one that is, but if you're curious, I do point it out in my Perfect Pairs Tarot video. So there is a little bit of a loophole, but just like with spirituality decks, shadow work decks, like 90% of the time, they will not pair with the Tarot of Oneness because it's the weakness. However, I did find one loophole for a shadow work deck. I currently do not have a working loophole that I'm aware of for spirituality decks. That's just the way the cookie crumbles. And next, we're going to show you another pip deck. Beautiful Beast Tarot was a pip deck. I do have another pip deck that does pair. That was Dmitry Rizak's other deck. It does pair. Nightmare Before Christmas. Very well-known pip deck. We all have feelings about Inside Editions, but this does not pair. And part of the reason why this does not pair has absolutely nothing to do with the fact that this is a pip deck, but has to do with the seasons. This is a summer feeling deck for the Tarot of Oneness. However, the Nightmare Before Christmas has Samhain and Yule influxes in the deck. I mean, both seasons are represented. So the feeling of this deck versus this deck are polar opposites. So they don't pair well, just because of the seasonal energy that they contain. And I just lost a crystal off the table and onto the floor. Hold on, just a sec, please. All right, crystal retrieved. We're moving on. Next, we have the Mystical Cats Tarot. Now, I have 2 cat decks in my collection. I have this one and the Soul Cats Tarot. So don't feel so bad that this one doesn't pair, for those of you that haven't seen my Perfect Pairs Tarot video, because the Soul Cats Tarot does in fact pair. Like I said, I only have 2 cat decks. So for those of you that have like the Pagan Cats Tarot or the Black Cat Tarot and the Cat People Tarot, let me know if you've discovered whether or not this pairs with the Tarot of Oneness. I'd be really curious to see how many either pair or don't pair with the Tarot of Oneness. But right now, I only have 2 decks. And the fact that one works, especially the main one that I like working with, pairs well, thrills me to no end, because it is a bit of, quote-unquote, a powerhouse. And moving right along, here's a deck that maybe not all of you have seen or are aware of. This is off Etsy. It is a majors only, and is the Neverending Tarot. In other words, it is a never-ending story, majors only tarot deck. I bought this because, well, I'm an 80s baby, and that's nostalgia for me. And believe it or not, the Neverending Tarot right here is really great at love. That is the strength of this deck. However, it cannot pair with the Tarot of Oneness. It doesn't, which is really disappointing, because I do have some other love oracles and stuff that do pair with the Tarot of Oneness. And as you notice, this is a majors only, and you read them only in the uprights. And the reason why these two do not pair is because this is a majors only. That is the reason, literally the reason. And that's kind of disappointing. It makes me wonder if this was not a majors only, if I would actually get them to pair. But because it's a majors only and it's read only in the upright, that's where these two decks just don't jive. And that's disappointing, because I would really like a strong love deck like this to pair with the Tarot of Oneness, who's great at self-care and connections, because that would make a great power combo when it comes to love readings. However, no bueno. These do not like each other. So we will just have to suck it up, I suppose. And I have one last deck to show you, and you're probably going to recognize it from the backings. It is the Good Tarot by Baron-Reid. This is another deck that, although is a full-size deck, you read it only in the upright. And these two really could care less about each other. Let's put it that way. They don't really want to even bother with each other. I guess you could call it agreeing to disagree. So this is my last deck for my anti-pair. And if any of you out there have found any other decks that do not pair with the Tarot of Oneness, that is a tarot deck, please list them for me down below. I'd be curious to know what they are. And if you have any of these decks that I have listed that do pair well with your Tarot of Oneness for some odd reason, let me know. Chances are you have a different strength and weakness than I do. Strength of this deck is, of course, connections and self-care with the weakness of shadow work when it's in my hands. So I am pairing or anti-pairing these based on the strength and weakness that I have for the deck. All right, my lovelies, if you've made it this far, I totally appreciate it. Thank you so, so much for watching. Feel free to like, share, and subscribe. And I will see you in my next anti-pair, which will be Oracles. Should be out tomorrow. Once again, thank you for watching. Bye.